So I just did a video on when to quit, number 39, and, made it sound almost easy in terms of the time is now. If you look at the calendar, there's never a great time, but we all know it. The time is now. And, there's a quote from Robert Downey Jr. that would back up that it is easy. He says, quitting isn't hard, but it's the decision to quit that's difficult. And I didn't understand that at first, but now I really get it. Until you make the absolute decision to take alcohol off the table and never question that decision. NQT, never question the decision. Until that is the hard part. That's when you've really made the decision to quit drinking. I've got a friend who's in early sobriety, struggling to get there, is having slips, thinking willpower alone can get it done. And, struggling with it being in the house due to a relative that also drinks. And, I've said, until you get to the point that alcohol is not an option, no matter what, you're gonna struggle. This reminds me of another quote that until you make sobriety your number one priority, you will drink again. And that goes hand in hand. So I can't emphasize this enough. And I do have a video number 15 where I talk about how I know I'm never going to drink again and talk about the reasons why, since it's, I've learned every lesson and I'm sharing those. I've done all the research for you. So check that out. But, I will say this is the third time I have declared that, but this one being the final. My day count now is going to infinity. The first time is when I quit for 3.5 years. It started after my rock bottom, which often is what it takes to get people to, make this hard decision. It still took me many months of drinking to essentially deal with the after effects of that rock bottom. But I ended up in the hospital with an illness, infection, unrelated to drinking. But I was in so much pain, I vowed that I was never going to self-inflict pain on myself again. And there was a few other, things that helped make that decision. But I made it. Fortunately, 3.5 years after that, I was no longer doing hard things sober. I lost my hard job and decided I was going to try to drink normal. I was not fortifying myself because I was not doing the work. Second time I made that decision was after my mother and sister had an intervention on Halloween about 2.5 years ago. And I vowed to my mother, who tried to make me go to rehab, but I said no, but vowed I would quit and get help. I joined an online community, and for 63 days, I did not struggle at all because I made that firm decision to quit. Alcohol was absolutely off the table, even at my pizza shop, my biggest trigger, with a liquor store 50 yards away. But that decision had been made. Fortunately, again, I was doing some work, but I was half-assing the work. And I had a great day at the pizza shop, and I chose to celebrate. The voice chose to celebrate for me by drinking. And I struggled mightily from there for a long time, basically up until I declared my final day 2 ever on Laura McCowan, the leader of my sober community, on her call. And, at which point, she said she was relieved to hear it, that my positivity alone was not enough. It had gotten me this far. But this is not an intellectual exercise, which I took to mean, quit half-assing the work. It's time to fully ass it. And that's when I started doing that. But I also, because I declared on her call, which I said I was never going to do until it was going to be my final day count, that's what really made that difficult decision that, damn, I'm going to go back to my pizza shop, and no matter what, alcohol is off the table. ABB, anything but booze and cocaine and the like. And that was it. And then from there, I started really digging into the work, which helped fortify myself, which means strengthen against mental and physical attacks, i.e. the attack of the voice. So that's what you've got to do here. You've got to make that decision. Now, I'll give you one more quote Laura talks about in her book, Push Off From Here. She quotes an author that says, if this is what I must accept, so be it. Saying that can be like chewing glass, but not being able to accept what you cannot change is like having to swallow those shards of glass. So for her, accepting sobriety and that she could never drink again felt like chewing glass, but continuing to try that third door, moderation, which is not possible. I have an episode on that. Continuing down that path of trying the third door and not fully, even if you don't think you're doing it, but if you're not fully taking alcohol off the table, I get news for you. You're still on a cutback track, not on a sobriety track. And that's what I told my friend. So for her, she said, continuing on that path would have felt like swallowing those shards of glass and would have yielded the same fatal result. And if you continue down that path and don't make that hard, final decision that take it off the table no matter what, to the point that you almost should be able to even live with alcohol in the house. I'm not saying you should. That's very difficult, not recommended at all. But I have gotten to that point in the past. I once hosted a marathon party. When I quit for those 3.5 years, I hosted a marathon party where I didn't drink, even though I drank always heavily at those. And then I had alcohol down in my crisper. I had a bunch of bottles of beer down in the crisper in my refrigerator for months before I finally brought them to golfing and gave them away to my buddies because I didn't end up having another party after that. And now I buy beer for, dinner dates at my place, and then I actually can leave, I left half bottle of wine in my fridge for weeks. I still bury it. I don't like to look at it. It's the enemy, but I can handle it. But I'm not saying those of you in early sobriety should, or certainly don't recommend it, but I'm saying if you truly take it off the table, it's just not an option. And you've got to get your mindset to that point. So I'll wrap it up with that, again, with that Downey quote, that quitting isn't hard. It's the decision, it's making the decision to quit that is the hard part. But you can do it. That'll do it. And remember, stronger, sober, and please, as always, like, share, subscribe. Thanks.